What if I told you that tariffs don't work the way that most people think? For decades, we've been told that tariffs protect American industries. Tariffs make our economy stronger. Tariffs ensure fair trade. But what if I told you that the truth was a little bit more complicated than that? Today, we're breaking down tariffs, who actually pays for them, and when they work and when they backfire. But first, to fully understand how tariffs function, we need to be able to define what they are and why governments use them. So, to get started, first we need to look at the definition of a tariff. So, by definition, a tariff is simply put a government tax on imports or exports, right? That's it. Fairly simple, right? Basically, the government places a tax on imported goods or exported goods in order to help bolster or bring up new industries or to help protect some industries that we're trying to grow a bit more. We have two main types of tariffs. We have ad valorem tariffs, and then we have specific tariffs. Now, for now, we're going to continue with ad valorem tariffs. The definition for those are that they are tariffs that are based off of a percentage of the item's value. So if you have an item that's worth $100 and there's now a 10% tariff put onto that, that means that instead of paying $100, you're paying $110. For specific tariffs, they are a fixed fee. So essentially, no matter how much you're bringing in or what it is, you are paying that specific amount. So if you're trying to import steel and we have a $5 per ton tariff on steel, boom, extra $5 per ton, right? Now, governments impose tariffs for a few main reasons. So number one, we have revenue generation, right? Now, historically, before we started using income tariffs, the main way that we financed our government and all of our industries and everything were through tariffs, right? Tariffs were pretty much the primary way that the U.S. government funded itself. Its money was used to build infrastructure, it was used to fund government operations, it was used to support the military, and unfortunately, as we started coming into the modern age, we started to go into more of a global economy, and governments stopped using tariffs as much as a main source of revenue. So we ended up moving to income taxes. And those were introduced in the early 20th century. Now, as industrialization progressed, economies became more complex with more diverse revenue streams, right? And with the introduction of income taxes in 1913 in America with the 16th Amendment, it allowed the government to collect directly from the taxpayers and businesses, which reduced our reliance on tariffs, right? And along with this, international trade also expanded, making high tariffs less sustainable as an income source as we were moving forward. And another thing is with the rise of central banking systems, such as the Federal Reserve, which was actually established in 1913, they helped manage our economic growth and helped manage our revenue through monetary policy rather than having heavy import taxes, right? So, another reason, or reason number two, was because of protectionism, right? Tariffs are often used to protect our domestic industries from the foreign competition by making the imports more expensive. So essentially, we are pricing the competition out of our market in order to help bolster our industries, right? Protection of tariffs were crucial during the early stages of our industrialization, just like they were crucial in just about every single other country, right? So by imposing high tariffs on imported manufactured goods, governments shielded their domestic industries from foreign competition. allowing them to develop and grow without having to worry about being undercut or bought out or stolen from by other industries that may be further along in the industrialization process. An example of this is with the American system in the mid to late 19th century. In the 1800s, we used tariffs to protect our emerging industries. So, coal industries, oil industries, farming industries, all those good industries that we have now that are big and bolstered are because we used tariffs earlier in the United States history. Now, there was a man named Henry Clay. He loved tariffs. Now, his main idea was placing higher tariffs on other countries to encourage our industries to start producing more locally within the country. The tariffs that were imposed helped our industries like the textiles, ironworks, and our shipbuilding, right? So a lot more industries, just like I was saying. High tariffs back in the day when we were early and we were building up our industries, they helped us build them up because it focused our efforts on building up our own products. And another example of how protectionist tariffs have helped a country grow is Germany. Under a man named Otto von Bismarck, they introduced protected tariffs into their economy to help strengthen their industrial base. So similar goals as the United States at the time. And funny enough, they actually started to do this roughly at the same time, which allowed Germany to emerge in the early 20th century as a world power. Now, it's important to remember that while early on these tariffs did help bolster our local industries and help bolster a lot of our industrial progress, these tariffs also came with drawbacks, right? You know, so most of the time we saw higher prices, we saw a constricted market, and we saw the world go more towards a global economy rather than staying localized within their own countries. So, next, we're going to look at some historical case studies, some different examples of other tariffs in history and the way that they've affected our economy as well as other economies. So, number one on the list, we have the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. Now, you might be thinking, 1930? Isn't that during the Great Depression? Yes, it is. In fact, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was enacted during the Great Depression, and it was intended to try and protect our industries, like that are a part of our farming industries and our manufacturers from foreign competition. So that way, during the Depression, we could start focusing more on local industries and building them back up like we did before. Now, the problem with that is that the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act added tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods, right? And you're not hearing me wrong, 20,000 imported goods. And it was meant to boost domestic industries by making foreign industries or foreign products more expensive. And at the time, they argued that this would help dig us out of the Depression. So, let's look at some immediate effects that we saw after we signed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act into law. Number one, we did see a slight uptick in growth of in our economy, but it was short-lived. Next, once other countries saw or heard that we had placed tariffs on their goods, they immediately placed tariffs back on us, and that led to a cut in our trade power as well as many other countries. Another immediate effect that we saw was with our agricultural exports. They were hit very, very, very hard because European nations placed tariffs on our agricultural export, which caused us to not be able to sell our exports because they were too expensive. Now, let's look at some long-term effects. Number one, we saw that instead of revitalizing the economy like they believed would happen, it instead exacerbated the main core issues that were happening with the Great Depression. Now, another long-term effect was with the collapse of international trade. It only served to make things harder in the United States. We ended up having more unemployment. We ended up having even more economic stagnation, to the point that people essentially started turning their noses up away from tariffs, right? And following that point, it ultimately led to the United States deciding that we're doing away with high tariffs, right? Essentially, we decided that instead of trying to keep trade out, we wanted to enter the global market. And that is when our modern economy was brought up. So, with these historical examples in mind, let's talk about one of the biggest misconceptions. Who actually pays for the tariffs? Now, many people believe that tariffs are paid by foreign companies, but that's not really how it works. So in this case, tariffs are paid by the American companies. Hi, QuickPaw. How are you doing? You making a visit in this video? I guess not. So in this instance, we're talking about American companies. So when a tariff is applied, the American company is the one who pays the import tax at the border. This increased cost then usually gets passed down the supply chain and usually ends up with the consumer. Now, we're going to get a bit more into the kinds of tariffs. There's one more that I want to discuss, and that's compound tariffs. Compound tariffs combine. Quick, Paul, what are you doing? Alrighty. You're making a visit? Is that what it is today? Okay. Well, as I was saying, compound tariffs combine both approaches of ad valorem and specific tariffs. They end up affecting consumer goods and industrial imports. Now that we know who pays for the tariffs, we need to ask the big question. Do tariffs work? So, do tariffs actually work? Well, it depends. It depends on what you're doing with them. So, tariffs have helped in situations where we're trying to protect early industries, such as in the 19th century when we were trying to protect our coal industries, our agricultural industries, our textile industries, things like that, right? They've worked when we were trying to encourage domestic production, right? But they typically don't work, or they typically fail when they're used in a way that doesn't actually help. So an example of it failing is causing trade wars. One big example would be the trade war between China and the United States during President Trump's first term. Another trade war would be the ones caused during the Great Depression with the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, right? Which also led to retaliation from other countries. Lastly, when they failed, they end up raising prices rather than helping, right? They end up making things less affordable and therefore hurting the people's pockets. So, tariffs. Now that we know what they do, who uses it, how they are used, what's our final answer? Do they work? Do they not work? Well, in my opinion, they can be used for a lot of good. Tariffs have helped us grow in the past, and we even still use tariffs in certain situations, right? But it very heavily depends on who is doing it, who is signing them into law, why they are being signed into law, and what is going on around the globe. Ultimately, it depends. But that's just my opinion. If you would like to voice your opinion, or you would like to see something covered in my next videos, then please comment down below, like, subscribe, and let me know what you want to see next.